The format is, for those of you joining us for the first time, we're speaking, we call the program The Other Side because we're bringing a different point of view, the other side of what you normally hear on Q95. Much more open discussion. We're probably going to be more nuanced with respect to the government and what the government is trying to do, the efforts that they're making. So that puts a slightly different editorial slant on the program. So that's why we call it The Other Side. And the format is we're going to be with you for 90 minutes. The first 60 minutes, we'll be talking. Kenny will be talking. I'll be talking. We also will be introducing a special guest. Kenny will introduce her, who a Dominican that has studied and lived in China. And we have probably 100 Dominicans or more have benefited from scholarships and have studied and worked, and they speak Chinese. It's a growing world. What's the significance of that? And we'll have an opportunity to talk to one of those Dominicans that lived in China, I think, for about 10 years, Kenny.
Yeah.
But before we go any so we'll do that for 60 minutes, and then 30 minutes we look forward to your calls and your interaction, your opinions, your contributions to the show. Please, call in. We'll give you a heads up as to when you can call in, and you will call in for the last half an hour. We'll give you an opportunity to express your opinion. We have some regular callers, some regular listeners, and we just want to say a special good evening to you, all of you. Some of you listen, well, you all listen. Some of you like Kenny and I, some of you don't. Some of you, you're robust. We like your challenging questions, people, honestly, because that's why we're here. We're here to have an honest exchange, and we look forward to your honest interactions, whether you agree with us or not. But before we go any further, we have a soapbox, which we introduced a few shows ago, which, one of us, tonight it's Kenny, and he will be able to go on the soapbox and speak about anything he wants to for about 5 minutes or so. So, Kenny, the floor is yours, and then we'll segue right into the discussion on China.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Good evening, listeners. Good evening, everyone on Q95. So yes, it's going to be an interesting show, and we won't be able to cover everything on that topic tonight, because I know we have a tight schedule. And yes, we're going to be joined by someone very interesting. But before that, wanted to talk on the soapbox about the power of information. And there are conflicting views in Dominica on nearly everything. It's like every other country, obviously. But when information is misrepresented, it does everyone a disservice, because it doesn't allow everyone to start from the same point and be able to even disagree on something. And I'd like to talk about the power of information or misinformation. I listened the other day whilst driving to an account of the history, again, of CBI. And I found it interesting, because it's always good to have a starting point from whence we came, so to speak. And I listened to the host talk about the effect of Rosie, the then Rosie Douglas, may so rest in peace, putting a stop on the beginning of the Labour government, putting a stop to the CBI program, the then re-engineered economic citizenship program, because of concerns by initially the government of Canada, which obviously led at the time to the curtailing of the visa-free relationship we had with Canada.
Along with other Caribbean islands.
Correct, yes. Antigua, St. Kitts. Well, St. Kitts came later. St. Kitts came much later, but with a few other islands. And I thought that the account did not do a service to where we are now, vis-a-vis what happened then. Because some of the same, kind of phraseology, or the same kind of terms were used, about the authenticity of the program. And I just wanted to give some clarification to the listener and the listeners, for them to understand the base of it all. Yes, the program was stopped in 2000 on the beginning of this Labour administration, but the program back then had just over 50 visa-free countries. And it's testament to where we've gotten, because I think for many people, the idea is that the program has piggybacked on the patronage and that there's not been an ancillary benefit. There hasn't been a similar benefit to the average person. But now we have just around 150 visa-free locations that all of us here in this studio, all of us here in Dominica, all Dominicans, everyone holding a Dominican passport can enjoy. And a product doesn't get better and worse at the same time. In other words, the idea that somehow the program is tainted and has issues, and that something over 100 new destinations have decided to give us the privilege to enter visa-free into their countries, that does not make sense. And everyone who listens to this program has that one common sense factor that unites all Dominicans, which is we understand the basic knowledge principle that if something is getting better, then you get more patronage. If it's getting worse, it gets withdrawn. And so this is where we're at right now. And it segues into our topic because China does not have many visa-free relationships.
Mhm.
And it is the fastest growing economy in the world. And it is carded by 2030 to become the largest economy in the world. And by some indicators, it already is. So we have to understand what are the benefits to us? What are the things that make the relationship of any advantage to Dominicans and to the business culture, the economic culture, the social culture of the country. So that's important for many people to have a grasp of.
So, Kenny, just to clarify, because again, you say what sometimes the talk we hear, the CBI program threatens Dominicans, and when I say Dominicans, I mean all of us Dominicans that travel with Dominican passports. It is a threat and a risk to us, and it is damaging to our citizenship, to our passports. This is incorrect, you're saying.
It's a lie.
It's a lie. It's incorrect. And the evidence is that in 2000, we had around 50 countries that we had visa-free access to, including Canada, which we lost. But we've gained another 100 countries, including China. I will ask you, Kenny, to give us a list of some of those other countries that because, I mean, is it small, obscure countries, or is it significant countries where global business people would want to engage in travel to or in commerce to? Give us some of those countries, because I just want us to be very clear. I don't want to ride over this. This is a very important point. There's an opportunity cost in everything. And we had a situation where Canada withdrew its visa-free access for Dominican passport holders, along with some other countries in the Caribbean in the turn of the century. But since then, the government have worked on strengthening the value of Dominican citizenship and its passport to where we've come from 50 to 150 countries, so that the passport that you hold, I hold, those people living wherever, these Dominican nationals, your passport is much more valuable now than it was in 2000. Am I being clear?
Yes, you're being 100%
Okay, so could you
clear.
tell us about some of the countries, and then I want you to go from that, Kenny, because I'll be like, today I'll be interviewing you almost.
I miss Tanya.
We miss Tanya. That's her role. But Tanya, I know I'm not as good as you, and you always pick on me. I don't know how I'll do in the studio. Maybe the DJ will start picking on me. I'm not used to not being picked on by Tanya. But I will ask you some of these questions, Kenny, because I'd like you to chronicle a little, go back a little to the relationship with China. The relationship with China changed in 2003, 2004. Tell us a little before that, and then go on to that relationship and share some of the benefits that Dominica has derived from the relationship with China. But first, some of the countries that have the visa free. I'm putting you on the spot. I know you probably didn't prepare for that, but some of those countries that Dominica has added over the past decade and a half, 2 decades or so, as have now having visa-free access that we didn't. And China, as we discussed, is a huge one. That's huge. But some of these other countries, and then chronicle the history of the relationship between Dominica and the People's Republic of China.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. I didn't prepare for this, but we have all of
You're smart, Kenny, so just go ahead.
Well, flattery. Well, we have most of the EU. I mean, that is critical because, you can take your citizenship as a Dominican, fly to Germany, to France. These things seem basic, but it isn't basic for a lot of people around the world.
But we had visa free to the UK before.
Yes, correct. Because
but not France.
We were a colony of the UK,
and as
a result, we adopted this like many other nations in the Caribbean. But to go to Germany or to Holland or to France or to Belgium, Austria,
any South American countries?
Yes, we've got Ecuador, Chile. We've got a number of different countries because you see there are two parts to all of this. Countries do not enter into visa-free relationships with countries they perceive to be a threat to both their national security and the integrity of their borders. So in other words, if they feel that you using your Dominican passport will enter their country and violate the stayover period, then they won't give you visa-free. So they look statistically and see how many people holding this citizenship are violating the integrity of other countries. And it happens a lot. I mean, some nations get stereotyped because obviously they have a lot of nationals who travel and who may overstay their time.
There may be an economic burden to the country.
Correct.
And so, but for Dominica, and again, this has made our citizenship by investment program very valuable, very interesting to persons who are seeking to have a second citizenship somewhere. And let's face it, high net worth people want a second citizenship somewhere. People who are stateless want to have a first citizenship, and there are choices out there. But this makes Dominica a good value proposition, a good country to be a citizen of, because we're peaceful. We have good relations with just about everyone, including China, the United States, the superpowers, Russia also. Also, Kenny, I know I put you on the spot. So people, you can go to cbiu.gov.dm, yeah? And there's a whole list of the countries. You can look at detail of all those countries that Dominica now enjoy visa-free relations with. But Kenny, chronicle a little, if you can, the second part of the question. We recognize Taiwan, and that's an unusual thing. It's an island of how many million? Close to 20 million people thereabouts. It's a part of China. It was a province of China, and in 1949, I believe, there was the Mao and the communists took over China after a protracted civil war, and the nationalists set up its headquarters in Taiwan. The United States and the West recognized, at that time it was the middle of the Cold War, recognized Taiwan and had hopes that one day they would take over and drive the communists out of China. And so they recognize and encourage countries, including small countries like Dominica, to recognize Taiwan. And in, I think, 1971, Richard Nixon, during the height of a Sino-Soviet conflict, he saw an opportunity to put a wedge between China and the Soviet Union at the time, and the United States established diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China at the time. And you've seen a huge movement of countries now recognizing this, that they're here to stay, the stable government of the People's Republic of China as the legitimate government of China, and in fact recognizing a one China policy with the hopes of a reunification of China at one day. And we saw at the time Hong Kong was a British colony, and Hong Kong then was turned over to China. We have what's that former Portuguese colony that the Gambia, Macau also has gone over to China. And so now we've seen this change. And at some point, I'm leading up to this, Kenny, what happened? We worked with Taiwan. I remember they used to give us agricultural assistance and a little support. We call it dollar diplomacy because we recognized them and they were grateful to our support. And then we had a change. And tell us about that.
I like when you ask a question and you give all of the points. That's great.
Well, you didn't answer the first one too well. So
I didn't want to go into a whole list. I mean, you have to give the listeners room to go and do their own research.
Correct.
And that's very, very important. I think that it bears noting that there's right now around between 11 and 13 countries in the world that recognize Taiwan. So it's really an inevitable process of China being recognized as the de facto country of China. And without going too deep into the politics, it is very important. It is the holy grail of the People's Republic of China to have the fact that they are the de facto China recognized. And I think most of the world has done that, including the United States. Despite obviously the politics of maintaining, some level of distance. In terms of the relationship with Dominica, I think Dominica was one of the first countries in the Eastern Caribbean to recognize China's role, as we've discussed previously. And part of that has been a number of things that have happened. We saw the stadium being built. We've seen
But this is one of the first things that the current prime minister did when he
Correct.
came into power.
Correct. He was when
scary that he brought the change.
Yes, correct. He fashioned the relationship, and based on that, since then, China has been a good friend. No, that hasn't compromised our relationship with other countries because, as the old British Prime Minister Lord Palmerston said, countries have interests and not friendships, so to speak.
They have permanent interests,
Correct.
not permanent friends.
Correct. And it is very important to understand that because Dominica's relationship with the United States is as strong as ever, and the relationship with China is extremely strong. And so that continues to be a feature of the relationship. For many people, I think it gets quantified in a particular way. People see the relationship sometimes in the infrastructure, into what is done, a school here, a stadium there, a state house here, hospital there, the grammar school and the road, the highway going from Roseau to Portsmouth. I mean, those are things for those of us who go way back who remember how the state of the highway was.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to most people as kind of like nothing almost now because we're used to it. But it has had a great effect on the social and economic life of Dominica because previously Dominica and Portsmouth was a problem.
I think I recall that the initial aid package was valued around $300 million.
Correct.
And that was no strings attached. That is a gift from the people in government of China to the government of Dominica.
Correct.
And since then, there have been a lot of assistance. And that was for the stadium, that road from Portsmouth to Roseau, which was the infrastructure, which is huge. Also, the stadium, the road from Portsmouth. What else came with that?
It was the grammar school.
The grammar school and the new hospital. Yes. And so those are okay. And additional things. Why would China do this? The average person is asking. Why would China give a small country like Dominica all of this assistance?
Well, without reaching into the head of the government and to the prime minister, there are practical reasons why it would have happened.
Correct.
And one of the practical reasons, as I mentioned, is that Dominica was one of the first countries to recognize China in the Eastern Caribbean. So there was the example being set of, look at what we do for our friends, and look at what we continue doing for our friends. And so that is very important because in that relationship, there had to be obviously a number of the leaders within CARICOM looking at Dominica and speaking to the prime minister and saying, how does this relationship work for you? So I think that's a critical part of why they're doing it. I think there's a lot of conspiracies that people build about what can we do for China? What can we do for X or Y? Well, diplomacy is an ongoing exercise. And, at different times, different countries have interests that need to be served. And for China and Dominica, the relationship serves itself well because, as you said, The Chinese feature one thing which is very important, very different, for example, from the United States or other countries, is that they do not impose their political views on a country, no matter what the system that they encounter.
So they work with who they meet.
Correct.
And also China, speaking of China, looks at things from a long-term perspective. In the West, we look at things at an election cycle. You know, in the United States, 4 years, and 5 years, whatever. But China, they look at things maybe a century, and they're prepared to make very heavy investments.
Correct. We have to go to a break, Sam, but when we come back, we'll talk about our guests coming on and also what has been happening with people and Dominica and China. Thanks.
Stay in the cage or you finally take the key. Oh, damn, suddenly you're free to fly. It'll take you to the other side. Okay, my friend, you wanna cut me in. Well, I hate to tell you, but it just won't happen. So thanks, but no, I think I'm good to go. Cause I quite enjoy the life you say I'm trapped in. Now I admire you, and that will show you do. You're onto something, really it's something. I live among the swells and we don't pick up peanut shells. I'll have to leave that up to you. Don't you know that I'm okay with this up, down part I get to play? Cause I've got what I need and I don't want to take the ride. And I need to see the other side. So go and do like you do. I'm good to do like me. Ain't in a cage, so I don't need to take the key. Oh, damn, can't you see I'm doing fine? I don't need to see the other. Is this really how you like to spend your days? Whiskey, misery, and parties and play. If I were mixed up with you, I'd be the talk of the town. Disgraced and disowned, another one of the clowns. But you would finally live a little, finally laugh a little. Just let me give you the freedom to dream, and it'll wake you up and cure your aching. Take your walls and start them breaking. Now that's a deal that seems worth taking. But I guess I'll leave that up to you.
Okay, folks, we're back on the other side. And the question that Kenny's going to basically, we're speaking about the relationship between Dominica and China. And I posed the question to Kenny, but Kenny, you know, there's a lot of suspicion about the motives. I mean, it's natural for humans to, there's no such thing as a free lunch, huh? Why we're very suspicious? Why is China being so generous to Dominica, and should we be suspicious? Have there been any downsides to the relationship so far?
That's a big question. I mean, in terms of the suspicions, let's just get one thing clear. For colonies, especially former colonies of the UK, and basically former slave colonies, China represents a really puzzling conundrum because, for one, you know, one of the things that the British and all of the colonies did was they passed down the Judeo-Christianity tradition to all of their colonies. They passed on systems of learning. They passed on systems of colonization all the way down. And China doesn't come from that tradition. So they're a communist country. They don't go to church. You know, it's something that is embedded within all of us. So there's a deep suspicion of, you know, what the motives will be, or are. But it is critical. There's something called 100 years of humiliation. I think it's been extended now to 120 years. I've heard it spoken about recently. And that is a critical factor for China. That includes the First and Second Opium Wars. It includes the rape of Nanking and the relationship with Japan. It includes the attempted partition of China. I mean, just like the partition of Africa, the colonial powers in 1990 attempted to partition China into pieces into which all of the different colonial powers would own a piece of China. And so when you ask about what is the motive, being able to be recognized as a full country is something we don't understand. But when you're a country that sees itself as a de facto empire, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, it is a critical factor. And I take the question of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a very important thing to understand. Is our guest on? So Hong Kong is a very important question to understand. In 1997, when Chris Patten lowered the British flag as the last governor of Hong Kong, I remember watching that live. When Chris Patten lowered the flag and said it was a sad moment for the British and for democracy, etc., what he did not realize at the same time, or he maybe did, was this was the end of a particularly humiliating chapter, because Hong Kong was ceded to the British when the British won the Opium War, the first Opium War. So that's very, very important for us to understand. I believe our guest is about to come on. Are you there? No, she's not on. Okay, so the guest that we have coming on, Sam, is very critical to understand the real purpose of the show. There have been lots of Dominicans who have gone to China to study, many over the last 15 years or so. But not many have gone through what this guest has gone through, which is that she studied in China, she's lived in China, and she's worked in China, I believe, for a period of over 10 years. And she speaks the language fluently. And at the same time, she's really through and through Dominican to the bone, as you would say. And so it's very interesting to get a perspective, because in reality, when we speak about these things, it's always good to have the perspective on someone who's actually there and facing it. You know, but just to answer your question, Sam, we underestimate the importance of China achieving that goal of being a full recognized nation, and for its claims to Taiwan, which is the most important thing to them from a political point of view, being satisfied, and them being reunified. So that is a big deal, and there's no ulterior motive other than the fact that China is a nation which wants to have its preeminence recognized. It's kind of like a delayed process. And the first Opium War is a very, very interesting reference point before we go on to the guests, because, you know, imagine if you will, that a country did not want to have drugs sold to its population. At one time, 70% of China's population was estimated to be addicted to opium. And it was being sold
to the benefit of the British Empire.
Or to the benefit of the British Empire. So the British sold opium as a drug into the population. And if you believe it or not, the British fought the Chinese for the right for the British to freely peddle drugs to the Chinese population. And to humiliate them even further, the Chinese lost. So the Chinese lost the war. And if you want to make an analogy, it would be as if, and I know we have a stereotype, would be as if Colombia went to war with the United States for the right to peddle cocaine to the United States population, and Colombia won. And then said, okay, give me Texas because you've lost. And that's what happened. You know, the British beat the Chinese at war in the first Opium War. In the second Opium War, they were joined by the Americans. And, you know, there's an interesting point that both the wealth of Theodore Roosevelt's grandfather and also John Kerry, the former Secretary of State's grandfather, was made from opium, from opium trading.
But Kenny, let's fast forward that. I know we're waiting on our guest, and until the guest is here.
I know you see it, you run with me, and I can cut you free out of the treachery of walls you keep in. So trade that typical for something colorful. And if it's crazy, live a little crazy. You can play it sensible, a king of conventional, or you can risk it all and see. Don't you wanna get away from the same? Oh, part you gotta play, 'cause I got what you need, so come with me and take the ride. till you finally take the key. Oh, damn, suddenly you're free to fly. It'll take you to the other side.
Okay, my friend, you wanna cut me in? Well, I hate to tell you, but it just won't happen. So thanks.
Okay, our call is going to come in a little while. When she comes in, we'll cut for her, Kenny. But I wanted to ask you, information, we talked about this in misinformation. We've seen and heard a lot of fear mongering about China. Some of it may be valid, some of it may not be valid. Recently, we saw this issue where there's a claim that an airport in Kampala, Uganda, has been basically foreclosed on by Chinese, and it instilled the fear of Chinese colonializing the developing world or countries like the Europeans did, and we should be afraid. Speak to that a little bit, because I don't know how it was. Was this true, or is this
No, it
fake
wasn't.
news?
It wasn't true. But I think we have to put it into perspective. China's become Africa's biggest trading partner, and that is a threat to the existing status quo. And China's biggest weakness is that it does not have a grasp on the media, global media. They're not a country that has any nuanced approach to media dissemination. The actual process of these stories started with the port in Sri Lanka. I'm sure you have seen the second port, not Colombo. And there's enough stories out there. And the debt trap myth is a myth, because with the Sri Lanka story, the debt to China constitutes 4% of Sri Lanka's actual debt. The majority of the debt is to I believe, Japan, India, and to the World Bank. But that gained headlines, and it was actually spoken about by Mike Pence at the time. It's part of the geopolitics that we're too small to deal with right now, to be honest. But the idea that the relationship has started based on a trap is a disservice. In fact, it's an insult to independent nations in Africa and throughout Asia. This idea that somehow these countries are being ladled by the clever Chinese and do not know how to negotiate the benefit of their own futures.
But we will get back to our discussion, but we have our distinguished guest, Miss Patricia Mills. Patricia, how are you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly.
Okay, sorry about coming in late.
That's all right. Welcome to the other side, Patricia.
Okay.
We
thank
welcome you because, first, you are a distinguished guest. We know you studied in China. We'll talk about that. But also, you're a woman, and we normally have a woman between Kenny and I. And right now, I have to look at him in the studios all the time, and
that's tough.
And it's not as good as looking at Tanya. So that's pretty tough, So I'm glad at least that I have your voice to help ease my pain.
Yes.
But we will talk. We want you to talk about, maybe Ken, you wanna jump in there with Patricia. Patricia, you went to China. How did that come about? You went to China, you studied there, you lived there. Tell us just ramble a little about your experience in China.
Okay. I went to China in 2004. That was the same year that we had Dominica started formal diplomatic relationship with China.
What did you go to study?
What?
What did you go to study?
Okay, so I went to study accounting. Yes, and so I studied. Well, first we have to do a year of Chinese study before we move into our majors, because the bachelor programs are taught completely in Chinese. So we had to learn Chinese, Mandarin, in order to actually do the degree. Yeah.
So where in China did you study?
I studied in Beijing. I studied in Beijing. Initially, when I went, I did my language at the Beijing Language and Culture University.
You actually had to say that in Chinese first.
Yeah, I had to try to remember.
Do you think in Chinese, Patsy? Just a small segue.
Yes.
Okay.
You have to think in the language.
I'll ask you something else, but when you're off the radio about you're in Chinese, but we won't put it on the air.
No problem.
Yeah, but that is amazing. So you are brave. So you were the first class that how many Dominicans went the year you went? And how many Dominicans have gone to China to study? Do you know?
Oh, hundreds by
About
now.
estimate. Mhm.
Hundreds by now, because when we
Wow.
went, we were 5. Our
Mhm.
first year was 5. The second year, I think it was also 5. And then by the third year, we had gotten some extra scholarships. So it got to, I think, 30 that year or 20 that year.
Wow.
Yes. So we had a period of 3 years, I think, where we were having not 20 or 30, maybe 15.
Mhm.
15 plus or the original 5 from the first set of scholarships. So maybe there were like 3 years of 20 students each year in the first 5
Wow.
years, I think. Yeah.
Mm. And what type of numbers are there now going to China to study?
To be honest with you, I am not too sure, but I think it's over 10.
Okay.
I think it should be around 10 or more. Yeah.
So how was your experience in China as a Dominican, a black Dominican in the middle of, well, Beijing is a big city, so that's a little more cosmopolitan. I've been to China too. Kenny has been to China quite a bit. I've been to China too. But what have your experience been as a Dominican going to China to study accounting? You completed your course in accounting? I hope you don't mind me asking.
Yes, I actually went all the way to doing a PhD,
Oh my God.
but
Congratulations.
I didn't complete the PhD though.
Mhm.
I decided to come back home. Well, I left to complete my PhD in September of 2017, and I landed in China the same day that Hurricane Maria hit
Mm.
Dominica. So I kind of made a decision it was probably time to come back home because I had my businesses here. And
Mhm.
yeah, I actually completed all my PhD courses. All I had to do was just do the paper. And
Well, you can still do that. You're a young woman.
hmm, it depends. Maybe
We'll
I'll go
talk
on a
about it
break.
after the program too. But so how was your how you're thrown into China? Uh, how was that
I
experience?
mean, I went to China, I think we went to China, the first group of us, or the first 2 groups. I think we went to China during the best time there was to go to China. In that, China was at a stage where it was moving towards where it is today. So we got a taste of the old China to some extent, and we got a taste of the present day China.
Can you explain that?
So if you've been to Beijing, I don't know, well, most likely, I think we've met in Beijing, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, we
Well,
have.
I
So
know the places.
Beijing, for example, Beijing have ring roads, right? So you
Correct.
have the second ring road, the third ring road, the fourth ring road, the fifth ring road, and the sixth ring road. When I came to China, I think only the 3 ring roads were already there. So you had the construction of the other ring roads. And I remember even the train, there was line 1 and line 13 and line 2. There were like 3. And now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Mhm.
So you can see that they've moved from 3 lines to 15 lines. And another thing was when we went in 2004, Beijing was also preparing for the 2008 Olympics. So that was just like everything was happening. Everything you could think of happening. So you saw that development was just going and going and going and going and going. And interestingly, like when I look back, I remember the price of real estate in Beijing being like around the areas, like around the school, was like 7,000 renminbi, which
Mhm.
in those times was about, let's just say, just around a little under $1,000, because $1,000 was around $8,225 during
Yeah.
that time. And then that same area today is probably 100,000 per square feet. So can you believe having an apartment during that time?
Wow.
The kind of, so even the shopping, there were like lots of markets, lots of underground markets. Things were like cheap. I remember going to the market with like 20 renminbi and coming back with eggs, meats, fruits, potatoes. It was just, yeah, it was so interesting. I would, if I had to do it again, I would do it with my eyes closed. I like.
So let me ask you, Patsy. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the kind of the foremost question is, how were you treated as a black person, a black Dominican woman back then, and how can you contrast it to now? And you're not the only person. I mean, there were other students from Africa, I guess, etc., who you met up there. But tell us about your experience in that point of view.
To be honest, it wasn't really a good experience being black in China to some extent. And I honestly believe it's not a matter of like racism. Some might be racism, but sometimes it could be a matter of ignorance, like not knowing better. Like, like for somebody to like come and like pass their hand on your skin and ask you like if you're that color because you bake in the sun, or you or if you didn't shower for some time, and like you probably in the train and then you see people. Now Beijing is a place that people from all over China come to look for a better life. You know, we go to neighboring islands, they come to Beijing. So every day you meet new people coming in, especially like in the trains. So they would be like looking at you and staring at you, because for many people it was like the first time
They'd seen a black person.
seeing a black person. So they would come and they want to take pictures of you.
Mhm.
And then for those who probably had a little knowledge, it would be like you like Kobe Bryant, you know, they would like, because they like basketball. So they would kind of like, but I think with the Olympics, it brought a little enlightening to a few people in terms of that, you know, like with the Olympics, you have people from all over the world taking part. So, and everybody was looking at the Olympics, you know, and then with Barack Obama becoming president of the US, that also, you know.
Mhm.
So, but for me, it was a matter of I didn't really let it bother me
Mhm.
a lot, because sometimes you just don't worry about, like, I just wouldn't bother with it, like, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you. I told him I was Wesley Snipes when I first went there. Yeah, yeah. Seriously, it was. I went the first time before the Olympics too, and I remember they were busy building that bird cage
Yeah.
for the Olympics in Beijing, and I went to the Forbidden City and so on. And you're correct, Patsy. There were people from all over China converging, and they
Yeah.
wanted. And then so I was with some handlers, and I said, "Yeah, I'm Wesley Snipes." And yeah, they can take pictures, and so everyone was lining up to take pictures, like
Yeah.
I was at Disney. But I thought that was funny. But again, it's you correctly identified that that's kind of because they're not exposed. But what about the harsh racism we read about? Bad treatment of black people with respect to housing and these things. Did you experience this, or and how much has it changed now? And now, I mean, I go to Shenzhen or Shanghai or places, and you just zip through. The transportation is very transparent. A lot of people speak English. How do you deal with China now? And have you had any of those horrible experiences, real horrible experiences that we not that we want to dwell on that, but just to keep it real, you know?
To be honest, apart from maybe a few, I personally didn't have that, like, to consider horrible experiences
Okay.
in China, like being black. I mean, you would come across the little normal, because for Chinese people also, they think that black people don't speak English. Huh? They think that as long as you're white, you speak English, and that black people. So they would, if you go to a little job, because you know we would do our little gigs on the side, teach a little English, you know. So you'd probably go to a job interview with a Russian that can't speak any English, and like somebody would be saying that how many childs you have, you know, and that person would get the job before you because of their color.
Mhm.
But I was fortunate enough to meet some really good people,
Mhm.
and I didn't really have those issues myself, but I know of people, black people, who's had that kind of problem. But in terms of what's happened recently, well, my last trip to China was in 2019, and everybody knows COVID happened. But going to the south, um, going to those factory areas and stuff, because so many black people go there, they are much more welcoming to, but that's on a business relationship, huh?
Yeah,
Because we
sure.
go for business, so we stay in hotels and stuff like that. But in terms of like direct business, going to the markets, a lot of them speak English there. They speak a lot of different languages there, because you have people from all over the world going to these areas to shop. So my experience wasn't bad in the South either, but some of the things that we see.
And in terms of the willingness to engage you as a person, I mean, I know you've done work in China, you've worked over there. How's your experience in terms of being engaged as a person doing business there? And I've been there many times myself, but just from your point of view, living there, and because you speak fluent Mandarin, is there an advantage to speaking Mandarin in terms of the perception towards you? How does that work?
Well, to be honest with you, even me, like speaking Mandarin does have an advantage, because, like, even going to the markets, I would hear, okay, perfect example. Huh? I remember going to a market with a friend of mine to buy something, and what they normally do is, they give the people who bring you a commission. And I didn't speak, and my friend was there. And the first thing when we entered the store was the lady was like, she asked my friend, like, how much do you want? She asked my friend, how much do you want? And my friend told her that I don't want anything, because that's my friend, and she actually speaks Mandarin.
That might have been an eye opener.
Yes, so that was good. And I have been to businesses, and I have gotten preferential pricing because I speak Mandarin. I've been in stores where they would tell you that an item is probably $100, and they would tell me it's probably $50. And that actually posed an issue for me here in Dominica with my business,
How?
because when I tell them like the prices that I would get stuff, they would not believe that I was able to get those prices. But my prices could be at a certain level, because there was not the agent,
And when you say they, you mean like customs? You mean like clients locally?
Well, generally.
Okay. So Patsy, I want to just, I know we have to get into the calls in a while. So I want to get into some meatier questions.
Okay.
In terms of the perception of the Chinese that you do meet, and I want to make a differentiation.
1 minute. Yes, what?
No problem. That's your working mom. That's great. I want to make a distinction between Chinese people and the Chinese government. I think often people, when they say China, it envelopes everyone. And there's a reason for me saying that, because like every country, you're going to have good people and bad people from a country. But Patsy, the question I wanted to ask you was, how has the relationship you feel between Dominica and China worked for you doing business? And what do you think, if you had to give a word of advice to either business people or to people who want to study, or to people who are thinking ahead as to what opportunities there may be, what advice would you give?
Sorry about that, Kenny.
No problem. You want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Yes, what I was saying is that, to get into a meatier point, if you had to look at the relationship between Dominica and China, and you had to speak to the average Dominican to give them a word of advice on how they could engage in business, or what it is that they could look forward to doing, and how the relationship can work for them, or for some advice from a business point of view to a person who's looking to do business with China or with Chinese, what advice would you give?
I would tell them, even to start business with a Chinese, you're going to have to build a relationship.
Guangxi.
Guanxi. Chinese business is based on guanxi. Like, relationships are very important. A relationship can decide whether your business is successful or not. So it all depends on what somebody wants to do. And I don't really see, or I don't, because China is so huge, and in terms of business, I don't even well, now with the visa, with the free visa entry, that will make business much easier, than like,
Also, can you explain to the average listener how it will make business easier?
because there is no need to apply for a visa. Applying for a visa, you have to get invitation letter, you have different things to come up with.
Correct.
But now we can actually just take our passport, walk to the airport, say we're going to China, get on a plane, get to China. Well,
Indeed.
I mean, not right now, because COVID has changed everything.
Locked everything down. Yeah,
You're probably gonna need 2 months to go to China now, just to quarantine.
correct.
But other than that, I think the lifting of the visa restriction was one of the good things that could have happened to increase business between China and Dominica.
Question to you, Patsy, again. What do you think about the I mean, I know, for example, at least one Chinese business here. That's Mr. Zhu, that's specialty making windows. They've been here since 2012. I spoke to them recently, and they have about 12 employees. They've been here manufacturing aluminum windows, doors, bathrooms, rolling shutters, fencing. They do donations to the President's Charity, to the Ministry of Education, Carnival opening for Mao and St. Joseph. They made donations after Erica and Maria. But what is your perception of, or is there a perception that you have of the Chinese who have business in Dominica? Do you get a sense that they have a community? Do you get a sense that they are here long term, or that they're just passing through? What's your perception of the Chinese here?
For those I know, each one is different.
Yes.
For those I know, each one is different, because we have Chinese here, like, for example, like Stephen
Mhm.
Riverside, who's been here for years, who's done massive investments here. And I don't think Stephen is going anywhere,
Yeah.
And then you have some, like those that have the stores in town, who are probably just passing through, and the people change ever so often. So it all depends on, on their plan, because people are different. Stephen parents used to be here in Dominica too. And for example, what's this other one? I have a friend, a Chinese friend, who have a store here, and he moved back. The business is still here, but he moved back to China.
Okay.
So they differ. And for some of them, for some who have kids here, when it's the time for the kids to go to school, they move back to China so their kids could go to school in China.
Okay. So it's not a, I mean, there's all of these stories about these people are here, they're working for the Chinese government or whatever. Can you talk to the fact that, often, as I mentioned to Sam, we don't make a distinction between individual Chinese people who are just as entrepreneurial as any other group of people. They're not some part of one big red machine. And the Chinese government, is there, I mean, would you be able to talk to that briefly, that about
as any group of foreigners in a foreign land, you are going to cling to your own, right?
Correct.
You're going to cling to your own. As to their relationships, I don't have any information as to, but just how, as the government would probably help a small business in Dominica, maybe they can get some sort of help. I don't know. For example, like when you're shipping out, I know that there is like export tax, that you, like some sort of like tax rebate you get to export in China.
Okay. Now, I mean, in terms of doing business, what kind of business opportunities there are, you think, for Dominicans, and what kind of opportunities there are for Dominicans who want to go to China? What would you say, again, your advice to people? I know there's quite a few people who are still interested in going to study in China. After all, learning Mandarin now is a huge benefit. I mean, Belt and Road alone increases the reach of Mandarin and the value of it across the world. But what other opportunities you think exist?
Well, as I said, Penny, opportunities, something that you might see as an opportunity, some might not see it as an opportunity.
That's true.
So opportunities are very, it's very, there's always opportunities. It's all based on what you want to do, So in terms of study, if somebody gets an opportunity to go to China to study, I would advise them to go. One, that's one of the best scholarships out there. And two, just being able to speak a foreign language like Chinese, that puts you ahead of just having a degree.
Yes. And you've paved the way, Patsy, because China now and China then are two different Chinas, right?
Yeah. Yep. But I still preferred my China of back then.
I mean,
I suspect you have another reason you prefer the China of back then, but we wouldn't discuss it.
No, it was just much cheaper before.
Okay.
It was much cheaper before.
And did you forge any friendships before we go into course? Did you forge any friendships with other nationalities outside of Chinese? I mean, I know you have relationships now. I've met you in China quite a few times.
Let me tell you,
mm-hmm.
Our school, they used to call our school the small Lianhegua, which is the small United Nations. Our school had people from 120 countries.
Wow.
So it's funny, the other day, a friend of mine, because like I sell my agricultural produce here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have pineapples, I have coconut water. So I advertise on Facebook, and I got a message from a friend of mine the other day because he actually thinks that's what I'm doing. And he's like, Patsy, how are you doing? I hope everything is okay. You can do so many big things. Don't underestimate yourself.
Okay, so I want to talk to, before we go into course, I want to talk quickly to one thing that I've constantly repeated about doing business with China, which is that for Dominicans, especially exporting to China is not very practical. No. Primarily because we just do not have the volume of goods to export.
Correct.
But what I encourage Dominicans to do is to take intellectual property very seriously. If you have a product that you can develop Guangxi with someone in China, through someone like Patsy, for example, and you have a product that you can make arrangements to be able to license to a Chinese firm, for example, to produce under that intellectual property. And China now versus China then is very different. China was known, and Patsy, you know this, and you know from the markets that you go to for intellectual property theft. Now China is actually coming up to the world standards in terms of protecting intellectual property, and they're the fastest patent developer in the world. But it makes sense now, if you're trying to get a product into China, to focus on letting it be licensed and marketed by a Chinese firm in China with your relationship, and to concentrate on the research and development of your product. So I keep on telling people that, because the classic idea of creating a product and exporting it is just the shipping alone is a problem. Yeah. So any last words before we go to the calls? I mean, I'd like to...
But Kenny, yes, with what you're saying, you still have to be very careful, because China has thousands, if not millions, of companies.
Yep.
And yes, intellectual property is there, but really, you're this black little person coming out from the Caribbean. Yeah. Sometimes we have to be realistic.
You have to be not just realistic, but again, Patsy, is the relationships, because at the end of the day, if you're not the front person for the product in a market, then it makes it easier for you. I think if you look at say like the Guangzhou markets, and that's where most of the Nigerians are, for example, in Guangzhou, they sell a lot of products from Nigeria and Africa directly into the Chinese market. but they're bringing over a lot of this stuff, and some of this stuff is actually made in China, which is quite funny. You get African products being sold by Nigerians, but they're made in China, and they're being sold by Africans as made in Africa. So it's very complicated. You're right, but I think it's better for the concentration on the relationship to look at trying to find what's unique about your product and having it replicated, because as you know, Patsy, they're gonna copy it anyway.
I was just about to tell you that it's rough.
But guys, if I can interject before we transition a little to the calls, it is, as Patsy, as you have identified it, it is a fast changing, fast evolving world, because even in your short span, relatively speaking, so much has changed. So you could imagine the changes we'll see over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So for a young person out there, I would strenuously suggest, in terms of opportunities, if you have the opportunity to go and study and learn in Chinese heritage, Chinese culture, to learn, to develop relationships, you should definitely go, because you're
For
going
sure.
to make yourself so much more, I don't want to put valuable, but if you can put value on your economic value or human resource capacity, you're going to open so many doors for yourself. And we don't know. I mean, right now you've got a situation in Ukraine with Russia and the United States. Things may change around the world. It's good that you train yourself, you develop yourself, position yourself, because you may really be in an ideal position for an opportunity
So Patsy,
coming forward. So-
Patsy, this is a segment where we take calls. So I'm gonna let a few calls come through so we can all field questions together.
And if Patsy has to leave, Patsy,
Patsy, if you have to
you're
leave,
a
let us
mother.
know.
If you have to leave, you gotta go.
We're good for now. I
Okay.
gave her.
All right, great. So we'll open up to the calls, please. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.
Good night, caller.
Yeah, so let me tell you the truth. I am about to take a decision to see whether I could listen to this program or not. But it will be unfair if I stop listening to the program without listening. That would be stupidity, right? In my view, I look at it like that. But I called to say something though. I called to say that you get the statistics of how many countries in 2000 we could have enter free with visa free. You said it was 50, right?
Just above that, yes.
Yeah, and then now you say it's 150. No, I'm not going to debate that. If I have any doubt, there's a guy called Stephen Nicholas. I believe he's one of the statistics. He used to, he's a statistician or whatever is the word. I could always call him and ask him whether that is true or false. But for right now, I'm not debating that. But sir, during that time, our country was highly respected. No, people don't respect our country. They don't respect our passports. You know that happened. Just recently, we had all our passports in some of the Arab countries by the street selling. We never saw that before.
Caller, thank you for your viewpoint. I disagree with that point of view. If you have someone who's a rogue actor, I mean, no one says that the United States is disrespected because Alan Stanford swindled most of the Caribbean. I don't agree with that viewpoint, and in fact, it flies in the face of what is facing you. The fact is, we've got more access, we've got more ability to travel, we've got better relations with a wider amount of countries. How does that equate disrespect? It can't. And I think you have to pull your personal view aside. You may not like things that the government are doing. You might not even like Sam or myself. But the facts remain that if you pick up your passport now and you decide you want to travel, you have access to more countries than you have back then. And that is not based on someone disliking you. It's because they respect the fact that you and your citizenship carries greater weight. That's all it is.
Ken, he spoke to something very specific, though, where he said, and I saw the image of a lot of what looked like passports that said Dominica being sold on a stand.
But
that's what he referred to. So maybe you can speak, because my understanding was that was passport covers, and that was not passports, and you cannot sell passport because it's the property of the government. It's just.
But we spoke to that on one of our earlier.
But
programs.
he may not have heard.
He may not
earlier
have heard
program.
that.
So clarify that, because we don't want to leave the gentleman.
I think
of
it
the
goes.
earnest opinion that people are hawking Dominican passports with bunch of passports on a table. We want to be very clear.
Recently, the CBIU of Dominica released a statement condemning that very act and making it illegal for anyone who propose themselves to be associated with Dominica's citizenship or the program to be having such images
An
shown.
image of just
Correct.
an image, not even the passport.
Not even
an
a passport,
image.
just an image. I mean, I understand the concern, but it doesn't stop rogue actors doing crazy things. I mean, we've seen people who have got upside down flags. You've seen Dominicans wearing images of the flag that are not necessarily permitted under our laws. You know, that doesn't mean that they're trying to, you know, they are disrespecting the entire nation. It's a lot of it is ignorance. But I was glad that the CIU stepped forward. And I want to repeat again, you can't sell a passport. There's no way you can sell a passport. It's not our property. And whether you're a citizen by birth or naturalization or by the citizenship program, you apply for a passport in the very same way. You pay $150 after you've been granted citizenship. So let's get that out of the way.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We have another call. Caller.
Caller, go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Sam, I got two questions.
How are you doing, by the
First of
way?
all-
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm Kenny.
Yeah.
Hi,
Sorry
how
for
are
my
you doing?
bad manners.
No
Good
problem,
afternoon,
man. No problem.
gentlemen.
Yes. Go ahead, please.
I got two questions. First,
Mhm.
and one of the question is that the revenues that been collected by selling our citizenship, the proceedings after all you pay the agents and whatever, who does it belongs to?
It goes to the Treasury. The proceeds for the state goes to the Treasury.
Okay, that's a good question, Sam, because lately I've been hearing some people talking about it doesn't belong to the taxpayers, and you know the treasury belongs. So that's a good question. I mean a good answer.
But I just want to be clear
And
so that
number two.
I don't want my answer to be misunderstood, because there are two components in the transaction.
No. My question is clear. The
Okay.
question is clear. Regardless of how many components, I'm specifically asking the proceeding, the money generated from either component.
Well, let me clarify.
After you pay the agents, who does it belongs to? That's a simple question.
And there's a portion that belongs to the government, and if under the real estate, there's a portion that goes from the investor to the development that they wish to invest in. That's the straight.
So what you tell me?
answer.
So what you tell me? We are selling our citizenship, and the proceeding is going. It's not coming towards Dominica. It's going towards the investor. That's what you're saying.
My friend, if you would listen, I can explain how it is. No, it is not a matter of my opinion. I'm just telling you how it is, huh? So you can say it's right or
Okay,
wrong,
all
or it's
right,
good or
okay.
it's bad. I'm
I
just
don't
saying
want to tie the
that.
line. Okay, I will leave it as that for now. Let me digest that part. Number two, I heard Kelly talking about the suspicions Dominican have about the Chinese. Can you tell us what is in the MOU Roosevelt Skerrit signed with the Chinese? Don't you believe Dominicans have a right to know what their government signed with any, not only the Chinese, with any foreign country? Don't you believe the people have a right to know what is in that MOU?
Caller, I believe the MOU was published many years ago in what is the New Chronicle.
No. Mm-mm.
So sorry,
No.
you can't ask a
There's a
question.
MOU that is signed.
You can't ask a question and define my answer. The MOU was published many years ago in the New Chronicle. The fact is, the relationship between Dominica and China has moved on many years beyond that. And so to dwell on what you think versus some kind of conspiracy that is floating around, I can't decide that for you. I can only tell you what I know. The MOU was published, and the MOU was supposed to have covered the highway, the hospital, the grammar school, and the stadium and the state house. I don't know if the state also is part of it.
Kenny, actually, our scholarships are also part of that MOU.
So there you go. But you see, Patsy, that's part of the issue, is this constant conspiracy and suspicion. And that is something that you sometimes you have to deal with. And other times, you know, the fact that you're here and you're a manifestation of the fact that there are people who've gone to China and have studied and have come back and are doing business is very important.
Paul, are you still there?
I think
Okay.
I think it disappeared.
Okay, we have another call now. Okay, Kenny, you can continue. Or
Yeah,
Patsy.
Patsy, I
Yes.
think we have a call coming in. All right. Go ahead.
Caller, please go
Hi,
ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sam. Good evening to you, Kenny.
Good
How are
evening.
Good
you, Sam?
evening.
I'm great, thanks.
That's your friend.
Okay.
I think that's Peter.
So, Sam, yeah, this is me. I have a question for you. Sam, earlier on in your program, you mentioned about Dominicans being able to travel to China for 3 months, visa free, and that's an accomplishment by the government of Dominica. Sam, reading your heart, Sam, really and truly, are you happy about that, Sam?
I think it's a good thing. What's the bad thing about that?
I don't understand.
What's the bad thing about that? Honestly, I'm asking you an honest question. What's bad about that?
Let me ask you, Sam, right?
Uh-huh.
I know you live in VI for most of your life, and you are a successful businessman. You did well for yourself in the US, Sam.
Mhm.
Sam, let me ask you tonight: how many Dominicans living in Dominica as we speak would or can afford? Do you know the price for a ticket to China, Sam? Did you know?
Yes, I've actually traveled from here to China. I'm saying maybe everyone isn't going to take advantage of the opportunity, but we all have the right to travel to China with our passports, and I think that's a good thing. Why is it a bad thing? I honestly want to know. You don't think it's a good thing? Why is it a bad thing? What's bad
Sam,
about that?
First of all, nobody in Dominica, as we speak right now, wants to go to China to do better to do well for themselves.
You-
Everybody in Dominica.
But someone is on the line that said they just did, my friend. You said nobody.
That you can't
Come
ascribe
on.
that statement in general.
Nobody.
No.
Maybe you might not.
I mean, I know,
Kenny,
for example, there's been at least, for example, the Chamber of Commerce sent about 5 young manufacturers to go to China to learn how to do small
It
scale
would take them
manufacturing
2-3
production.
months to get a visa. Now they can just walk in with their passport, my friend. I think that's a good thing.
Patsy, please, you wanted to say something.
maybe next time for a discussion like that, you should probably invite a few other students or because you know Dominica has had a lot of people who went to China.
Yes.
Even because of the whole government to government relationship, and most of them, like maybe 90% of them that I know, have already told me if they are given another chance to go to China, they will go back to China. Even when the free visa for Russia came up, I remember like everybody was getting so upset, and I remember my friends in China was so happy because when you're in Asia, sorry, 1 minute.
That's authentic.
Maybe you want to be on the
Go
radio.
ahead, Patsy. Oh, I think we have a call on the line. 1 second. Let that caller come through.
Good evening. You're live on the other side.
Okay, thank you, sir. You told us earlier, sir. You told us earlier that all these things you spoke about China did for us. They did it as friendship, as a gift to us, as friendship to a friendship government. Did you say that?
I put out there that China is doing this because it's in their interest to do so, to build a relationship with Dominica. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, you said that. But how can we trust that when our prime minister told us that Petrocarib oil gas was a gift to Dominica, and after the hurricane, I almost vomit when I get to know we were owing $120 million. How can you believe that? Good night.
I mean, I can't go into your head, caller. I can't share your doubts because I have a different experience from you. Let me give you a simple example, and Patsy can vouch for this. We in the Caribbean have a $600 billion. That's across the Caribbean. I don't know what it is for Dominica. $600 billion trade deficit with the United States. The irony of this is that many of the products are either part manufactured or manufactured in China and come through relationships in the United States to people who have agencies, what they call the comprador bourgeoisie, across the region. So someone has a relationship, they have an agency for a product that comes from the United States with a brand. And that brand comes into Dominica and someone pays money to the United States to get that brand to then resell locally. It makes total sense to develop relationships in China if you want to do that kind of thing. Now, from a bidirectional trade relationship point of view, the value of the relationships with Dominica means that also Chinese investors or business people or people outside of China, even Americans and Canadians, can take better advantage of the relationship by investing in Dominica as a pathway into getting patronage from China. So there's different ways you can look at it, but I don't see the negative.
I want to touch on an angle here. We have a call, but okay, I want to touch on an angle here. Opportunity means something in the future, right? So this presents a tremendous opportunity. What we have to do is embrace it and see how, as younger people going forward in an evolving world with evolving opportunities, how we can parlay it, how we can use it to our advantage. And that's what it is. It's an opportunity that exists. And again, it's something that a lot of other countries, a lot of other people don't have. So here it is, people use it or don't use it, but it's an opportunity that exists.
Yeah, call us.
You're on live on the other side.
Yes, good night to you, Sam, and good night to you, Mr. Green.
Good night.
And good night to your guest. Mr. Green, the question I really have for you all tonight is that it's not a difficult question.
Yeah.
A very simple one.
Okay.
China is dealing with Dominica. Fine, I agree with that. They are doing trading, whatever, they are helping us in some form or the other. But why is it that we in Dominica have to be adopting China policies because they are helping us? Because many times I hear the Prime Minister saying that he has a one China policy, a one-party state. But can Dominica really be a one-party state? And I know Dominica, I born in Dominica as a democratic state. I would like you all gentlemen to clarify it for me, please. Can we be a one-party state within a democratic state? Good night and thank you all.
Thank you for the question. I don't understand the meat of the question, but all I can say is that even in democracies, you can get a party that is dominant. That happens. I mean, there's a gentleman who's on many of the programs on Q, Alvin Thomas. I've interacted with Alvin Thomas, and he is very keen, very big on Singapore and Singapore's advance as an economy, as a democracy. But one of the things that he's never mentioned, maybe he does not know, is that the one party in Singapore has been in government for 78 years.
I think what the caller is saying, and I will seek to clarify. I think the Prime Minister has articulated that we support the one China policy. He's never articulated that anything about a one-party state.
No,
and again, we will go back to what Kenny mentioned, in that he's talking about the sovereignty of China, and we respect and recognize the sovereignty of China as a complete country. That's all that is. I think we had another call. We missed them, I think. Yeah. Okay.
And the other thing, Patsy can talk to that as well. I mean, relationship between Taiwan and China at another level. I mean, there's a lot of traffic, there are a lot of flights from Taiwan to China. A lot of Taiwanese work in China. So it's not like there's a complete impasse. It's a desire of China to reunify. That is their political imperative. And the fact is that all countries on the world that recognize the one China policy say the same thing that the Prime Minister says here. It's not unique. I think there's a need, however, for Dominicans to engage China by going to China. Even if I was a musician, I would be lobbying the government to get me into China.
Yeah, we have a call. Caller, you're on live.
Yeah, sorry, I got caught up for something, but listen, I don't want to take I disagree with your answer if I ask the answer. But what I'm saying is that I heard the Chinese ambassador with Matt on I think it was the hot seat, and he asked the Chinese ambassador at some point, and he said he would look into it and he would get back and give. And up to now, we never get the answer, because I think there were two MOU signed. One with maybe the hospital and some triple program or something. But there is a MOU Roosevelt Skerrit signed with the Communist Party of the Chinese, which is a branch of the Labour Party, and we don't know nothing about it. So that is why we have to be suspicious. Listen to this. I got something for you, Sam.
Please.
I hear you take a cheap shot on Danny Luge. I tried to call, but I wasn't successful. In that you were saying that when Jungle Bay had the after the storm and you were planning to move Jungle Bay to another country, Roosevelt Skerrit reached out to you, which is good.
Right.
And then you criticized Danny Luge, saying that he was trying to take bread out of people's mouth.
Right.
Now, Jungle Bay, hold on. Jungle Bay, I think at the time maybe was employing about 60, 70, maybe 80
65 people
individuals.
initially, yes. You got the numbers.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Now listen to this, Sam. That's why I say it's a cheap shot you take on Danny. Because Ross University was employing hundreds or maybe even thousands of people. 1/3 of Dominica GDP, and he did nothing and allow Ross University to leave Dominica. So if you want to talk about taking food out of people's mouths, you have to be very careful. You have to look in your party, because Roosevelt Skerrit is a perfect example for that. And that is why when you had Bad Will, that guy there, I call and I tell him, I ask him about Vesco Jones, because here you have an individual working and you're taking out food from his mouth based on political motivation, knowing the boy is innocent, and you say, okay, he'll have to answer because it's in the court and blah blah blah. So we have to be honest. That's why I'm trying to have a civil debate with you guys.
And I appreciate that.
I'm not on the other side, so
okay.
I can respect your opinion, because we all cannot be on the same side.
Correct.
I have a lot of respect for democracy, and I try to be civil.
Caller, we have
But
limited. We have 5 minutes.
When you
left.
have you guys playing personal politics with Dominica, like Dominica belongs to one set of some, that is wrong.
Let
It is wrong.
when
that MOU, you have to look into
I
that
will
MOU, because
clarify.
there's an MOU
I will
that's
clarify,
signed with
man.
China.
Caller, we have to move on. We have to move on. There are other people waiting. Sam, I mean,
I will clarify. You call it a cheap shot. That that was not a cheap shot. I basically stated that any member of parliament would embrace such a development in their constituency, and him attacking that development was taking bread from his constituents' mouth, and I stand by that. No apologies there. I think that this is something that if you're going to represent the people, you cannot get all emotional about certain things, and maybe you don't like the person that's developing it. You have to look beyond that and see opportunities and employment for your people. And this is something that I think he missed the opportunity there. So, caller, that's that. In terms of Ross University leaving, I don't think that the Prime Minister was eager to see them go. I think, there were conditions, there were things with flights and so on that was challenging. Again, I don't know. Could he have done more? I am not in the Prime Minister's head. I mean, haven't spoken to that.
The question you have to ask yourself is, and I always find these conspiracies interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a prime minister of a country in a constituency that supports him chase out
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
The truth is that the company which had bought DeVry did not have a long-standing relationship with Dominica anymore, and made a business decision to leave. And the prime minister and the government of Dominica was powerless in that decision.
But he lives in the Virgin Islands. He knows Hess Oil closed down the refinery. You didn't say the governor chased them down. Another BP and Sinopec came and signed on recently. They shut down the refinery. People lost thousands of jobs. They're very upset. Private companies open and close in jurisdictions. When that happens, you cannot just blame the government.
I think one of the biggest things, if we want to end on,
to be honest
quickly
about it.
on two things. With regards
we
to
have
this,
one more call. Are we going to give that?
give that one person a chance, please. Yeah,
you're on live on the other side. Please make your point.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, Kenny and my brother Sam.
Yes.
This is Bruno here, Sam.
Hey, what's up?
I'm good. I'm listening to the program, and I always welcome the program, but I just have one concern with regards to the name, given the level of separation and division and segregation we have, and or we split up. I would prefer we use a more welcoming name. The other side sound like we have two sides and we are pulling, forcing, and fighting because.
Caller, I don't want to rush you, but we have 1 minute and you know, the host of the program. But
Mr. Sheridan is chasing us.
He's chasing us. So thank you for your point. We'll close off on this. I want to just tell you that the other side of the coin, the other side of this story is a legitimate attempt to get people to listen. And guess what? People are listening. Even if they dislike or they disagree, they may abuse you in private or abuse you in public, but at the end of the day, people listen. And that's the whole point. I think we have to be able to listen to things that we don't normally listen to, disagree with it, but at least think about it and then be able to kind of figure out whether you want to do some more research and find out a bit more.
Yeah, the program is evolving, people, and who knows where we'll be 3 months, 6 months down the road. So let's stick with it and let's see. We have an open mind, Kenny.
Correct.
And we will continue. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening to The Other Side tonight. Patsy, thank you so much for your contribution. And Kenny, this is Sam. Tanya, we miss you dearly. And to all our dear callers, listen up next week. Patsy, you want to have a closing shot? Say good night.
I just hope that people take a chance at the opportunities that have presented itself.
Right.
And it's rather, to be honest, it's rather disappointing that all the questions that wasn't related to what you were trying to bring across. But I guess everybody has his or her own agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But you all, we spent a great time together, and thank you for inviting me.
And thank you.
If anybody has any questions, I have a consulting company and they want to find out some more about China, they can contact either of you, and you all know.
What's the name of the company? You can say it.
Please.
We want to push your company here. What's the name of your consulting company?
Caribbean Sino Consulting Services Limited.
What's the phone number?
225-7338.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much, Patsy. And
Okay.
guys, we'll see you next week at 6 o'clock next Tuesday.
Thank you. Take